Dear organizing committee and participants, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizing committee for the conference and look forward to attending more international conference hosted by Social Science and Humanities Research Association. I'm Associate Professor Doctor working at Tarsus University, Mersin, Turkey, and I'm going to present our study, Does Psychological Ownership Affect Green Organizational Behavior? In this sense, my presentation includes a brief introduction, conceptual background, method, results, and concluding discussion. Uh, During the last decade, management practitioners, scholars, and consultants have concentrated their attention on psychological ownership phenomenon via employing an array of concepts. In this regard, psychological ownership refers to evidence itself in terms of personal feelings of specific ownership and personal recognition that other individuals may experience a perceive of ownership for the same object. Also, the increasing awareness for environmental sustainability and protection has led to burgeoning research on green organizational behavior concepts, and it has been presumed that the organizations may not survive without being sensitive to environmental issues, regardless of which industry or sector they operate in. In this frame, green organizational behavior refers to employees' behaviors toward protecting the environment in terms of management and employees within the organization. And psychological ownership in organizational plane. Practices aimed at improving positive organizational behaviors within the organizational plane are vital for creating and sustaining a high-performance organizational culture where the individual and organizational strengths are optimized and top talent retained. Uh, in this frame, psychological ownership, one form of positive organizational behavior, includes self-efficacy, accountability, self-identity, and belongingness that are an imperative determinant in the improvement of individual performance. Psychological ownership alludes to an emotional and cognitive engagement between the object and the individual, which in turn modifies self-perception of the individual and reinforces the behaviors. It addresses the question what can be psychologically owned. The sense of ownership enhances for objects that are both materials and non-materials. In this sense, the question what can be in this sense, psychological ownership represents the positive feelings that tie the individual to tangible or intangible objects, explaining itself in such mind and mind possessive expressions. A psychological ownership consists of four characteristics such as self-identity, efficacy, protective focus, and internal responsibility. Self-identity includes not only self-knowledge but also one's persona is recognized by one's fellows. Efficacy means to believe in an individual's skills to encourage the cognitive resources, courses of action, and motivation needed to meet given situational demands. The protective focus is considered as a function to protect and enhance the target ownership. The sense of responsibility is likely to manifest itself in the discretionary behaviors that the individual directs toward the target. And green organizational behaviors and today's business environment shows that it is not possible to survive without being sensitive to environmental issues, regardless of which industry or sector they operate in. And it is emphasized that green organizational behavior can be defined as behaviors that can contribute to protecting the environment in terms of management and employees within the enterprise. And it is argued that green behavior reflects the employees' behavior toward green policies that promote sustainable attitudes and whether work practices represent the organization's environmentally friendly policies, values, and goals. Environmentally sensitive attitudes and oriented behavior implies strong support for green procurement and green organizational behavior. An organization's future direction concerning environmental policies and practices relies crucially upon whether the management team fosters employees to efficaciously participate in the green management initiatives and on management's commitment to green practices. Environmental participation refers to the participation of employees in the organization's environmentally friendly practices and rules and commit themselves to carry out environmental improvements, demonstrating such commitment through green organizational behaviors and being aware of economic sensitivity for environmental sustainability. Green purchasing is explained as the implementation of an environmental conscious purchasing practice that reduces sources of waste and supports recycling and reclamation of purchased materials without adversely affecting performance requirements of such materials. When considered as an organization's practices, technological sensitivity green organizational behavior is described as the software and/or hardware innovation regarding green products or processes compromising the innovation in technologies that are involved in pollution prevention, energy saving, green product designs, waste recycling, or corporate environmental management. And thus, we proposed, and our hypothesis one is psychological ownership and its subdimensions have a statistically significant impact on green organizational behavior. And our second hypothesis is psychological ownership and its subdimensions have a statistically significant impact on environmental sensitivity. And our third hypothesis is psychological ownership and its subdimensions have a statistically significant impact on environmental participation. And our fourth hypothesis is psychological ownership and its subdimensions have a statistically significant impact on economic sensitivity. And our fifth hypothesis is psychological ownership and its subdimensions have a statistically significant impact on green purchasing. And our last hypothesis is psychological ownership and its subdimensions have a statistically significant impact on technological sensitivity. And our measures and method is psychological ownership PO was measured with the scale developed by UCHAR, which has 15 items and 4 dimensions, including self-identity, SI, efficacy, EF, protective focus, PF, and internal responsibility, IR. And green organizational behavior, GOB, was measured with the scale developed by Erbaşı, which has 27 items and 5 dimensions that are named environmental sensitivity, ES, environmental participation, EP, economic sensitivity, ECS, green purchasing, GP, and technological sensitivity, TS. And in terms of sample and data collection, the data was collected by using the convenience sampling method, and the population of the study constitutes one of the leading fastener manufacturers of Turkey. The company was founded in 1979. Turkey and already exports its products to more than 50 countries, makes its high-strength anchors, bolts, studs, threaded rod, and nut productions by considering international quality standards and customer demands for power transmission lines, construction, steel construction, machinery, shipbuilding industries, as well as the construction of petrochemical, railways and refineries, tunnels, plants, roads, and dams, and the wind energy industry. Additionally, it is a solution partner for global firms and mega projects. In the meantime, for instance, the company produced anchor bolts that have carried piers of the world's longest suspended bridge, Çanakkale 1915 bridge, once completed. Further, the company has been known as the first company of Turkey which has received significant certificates in the industry and provided the services thereof its 290 employees and solution-oriented approach in high strength and large scale in the production of connection fixtures. In this frame, the questionnaire was distributed to 251 employees during their work, and they were informed that their participation was voluntary and responses would remain anonymous. Out of 251 responses, 248 were considerably returned. However, 237 responses were deemed appropriate for the analysis. And taken into consideration of descriptive statistics of the sample, here, as you can see, I'll skip this. And data analysis. In the study, Combas alpha analysis has been used to estimate the reliability coefficients of the scales and their subdimensions through the SPSS 26. Factor analysis. The Kaiser-Meyer-Olkin measure of sampling adequacy and Bartlett test of sphericity have been tested to explore adequate samples. Correlation analysis has been tested to explore the potential relationship between psychological ownership and green organizational behavior. Multiple linear regression analysis has been utilized to examine the impact of psychological ownership and its subdimensions on green organizational behavior. And the subdimensions to test the proposed hypothesis, p-values considerably less than or equal to 0.05 have been accepted as statistically significant in this study. And results. As you can see from table 1, the factor analysis of psychological ownership scale. As a result of the factor analysis that has been applied to 15 items remaining in scale, a 4-factor structure emerged. There were 4 items were loaded into self-identity, 4 items were loaded into efficacy, 4 items were loaded into protective focus, and 3 items were loaded into last factor, which is internal responsibility. And here is table 2, the descriptive statistics of the psychological ownership scale. The mean score for psychological ownership and its subdimensions were over the average score of 3, specifying that reflects the participants' psychological ownership and its subdimensions level was considerably high, since skewness and kurtosis are the useful test of normality, provided the limiting variance accounts for the serial correlation in the data. Skewness and kurtosis values are respectively acknowledged as valid if they are between positive or negative 1.5 values. Psychological ownership and its subdimensions, skewness and kurtosis values are valid for a normal distribution of the study. And here is table 2, the factor analysis of green organizational behavior. And in this line, the factor analysis has been applied to 27 items remaining in the scale. A 5-factor structure emerged. There were 6 items were loaded into environmental sensitivity, 7 items were loaded into environmental participation, 4 items were loaded into economic sensitivity, 5 items were loaded into green purchasing, and 5 items were loaded into technological sensitivity. And here is table 4, descriptive statistics of the green organizational behavior scale. The mean score for organizational behavior and its subdimensions were over the average score of 3, indicating that on average the participants are paid more attention to green organizational behavior and its subdimensions. By the same token, skewness and kurtosis values of the latest scale show that the data has normal distribution. And the table 5 shows the relationship between psychological ownership and green organizational behavior, and the results indicate that there is a strong positive correlation between green organizational behavior and psychological ownership. And table 6 shows the impact of psychological ownership on green organizational behavior, and the results show that adjusted R-square was 0.49, which reflects that there was 49% of variance between psychological ownership and its subdimensions and green organizational behavior. The model as a whole was statistically significant. And psychological ownership has a positive and a strong impact on green behavior. And table 7, the regression of associations between psychological ownership and green organizational behavior subdimensions. As shown in table 7, the model as a whole was statistically significant, and all hypotheses were supported. So, concluding discussion, since employees who feel psychological ownership have a perception of responsibility toward their organizations to protect and altruistic behaviors, higher level of psychological ownership felt by employees may reveal employees' embedded feelings and behaviors regarding green organizational behavior and purchasing. And it is argued that stricter environmental regulations and guidelines, as well as customers expecting and valuing sustainable products and services, organizations' environmental performance becomes increasingly important. In this frame, psychological ownership may environmentally foster friendly behavior of employees and constitute employees' green tendencies, specifically being more sensitive toward environmental issues that directly promote the economic performance and profits of organizations. Due to the usage of green concept as new technology and new products that have a sustainable impact on nature and the environment, psychological ownership that has been strongly felt by employees may serve to increase productivity and domains of recycling via reducing energy usage, the volume of hazardous wastes, or the use of raw materials and preventing pollution with other proactive green technology efforts. It aids in advancing the subject of initiative of environmental participation in green behavior. Organizations need to be aware of the process that has long-term conditions and continuous efforts, since green is oriented toward the productivity and sustainable development of the organizations. Due to the importance of these findings for both organizations and employees aiming to increase organizational performance and obtain high profits, organizations should constitute an environmentally friendly work climate for the psychological ownership of the employees. It has been recommended that organizations should concentrate more on shaping the sense of psychological ownership and encourage green responsibility measures that can be interiorized by the employees. Thank you.